Hi, I'm Ava, 31, and my family cast me out when I was 22 because my 15-year-old cousin claimed I molested him. Now, almost 10 years later, my family has suddenly resurfaced with a text apology. A single text delivered by the same person who passed the sentence. My mother. It landed on my phone an hour ago, a little blue bubble of poison and maybe, just maybe, antidote. For a decade, my name has been a curse word whispered at holidays I was no longer invited to. For a decade, I've been a ghost. So the question that's been screaming in my head for the last 60 minutes is this. What in the hell are you supposed to do when the people who buried you alive decide to come back with a shovel? Before the silence, there was noise. Good noise. The kind you make for yourself. But before that, there was their noise. The chaos and warmth of a big family. I remember summers at the lake house, the screen door slamming shut every 10 seconds, the smell of barbecue and lake water, my dad teaching me how to skip stones across the glass still surface at dawn. He'd find the perfect flat ones for me, his big, calloused hand closing over mine, showing me how to flick my wrist. It's all in the angle, Ava girl, he'd say. That was his name for me. Ava girl. I haven't heard it in 10 years. I remember my 15th birthday, my parents surprising me with a kitten, a tiny scrap of gray fur I named Ash. My mother, who claimed to hate cats, was the one who bought him a ridiculously plush bed. I saw her sneak him bits of chicken from her plate when she thought no one was looking. I freeze. Because right then, even in the good memories, the red flags were there, fluttering like tiny prayer flags in a storm I couldn't see coming. My mother's love was conditional, tied to performance. Good grades, a clean room, a pleasant demeanor, these were the currency of her affection. A B+ on a report card would be met with a tight-lipped, "You could have done better." My father's affection was a quiet, distant sun. You could feel its warmth, but you could never get too close. And Ellie, my cousin Ellie, had always been a storyteller. At 9, she told everyone a stray dog spoke to her in perfect French. At 12, she accused a neighbor of stealing her diary, a diary we later found under her own bed. We all just laughed it off. That's just Ellie, we'd say, ruffling her hair. She had a flair for the dramatic. No one ever thought to ask if that flair had a darker side. My life was measured in RPMs and lines of code after I left for college. I'd wake before the sun, pull on my leathers, and skim Denver's empty, sleeping streets on my battered old Ducati. The engine growl was a prayer against the quiet. It was the only voice I trusted completely. Speed was my therapy, a way to outrun a shadow I couldn't name yet. Then it was 8, 10, 12 hours at my desk, debugging code for a downtown tech firm. I loved the logic of it. The certainty. If a line is broken, you find the error, you fix it, you move on. There's no room for interpretation, no space for maybes. People are messy. Code is clean. My pulse stalls. Because right then, I'd get home and the world would shrink to the size of my small starter house on the edge of the city. It was mine. Every crooked floorboard, every leaky faucet. It smelled of engine oil and the basil sprigs I was trying to grow in a pot on the windowsill. I bought it with my own money, with a bonus from a project I'd poured my soul into. I was trying to grow roots, to prove to myself that I could anchor to something. My birthdays were quiet rituals. No cake, no surprise parties. Just me, a bottle of something expensive, and a new gadget to assemble. One year it was a high-end 3D printer. This year, a top-of-the-line VR headset. I'd sit on my living room floor, surrounded by cardboard and plastic wrap, building my own presence. It was a way to fill the space, to unbox something other than loneliness. I stopped breathing. Because right then, on a Tuesday afternoon in April, my phone buzzed. My mom. I ignored it. I was in the middle of a complex deployment. Work was a convenient excuse for an inconvenience I felt in my bones. It buzzed again, less than a minute later. That was her signal. The double call. It meant emergency. It meant drop everything. The last time she'd done it, my grandfather had fallen. My stomach went cold. I stepped into the hallway, away from the hum of the servers, and answered. Crisis or execution? I had no idea how close I was to the truth. Ava? Honey, is this a good time? Her voice was tight, stretched thin over a wire of panic. I told her I had a minute. Good. Can your father and I talk to you? The "and" was a warning bell. They were a united front only for discipline or disaster. My dad hated the phone. This was bad. I agreed, and I heard the faint rustle of the phone being passed, the click as she put it on speaker. There was a pause, a shared breath on their end. Then my mother spoke again, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that made the hair on my arm stand up. Ava, before we say anything, is there something you need to confess to us? I freeze. Because right then, the world tilted. Confess? My mind raced. A speeding ticket? The time I borrowed her car in high school and scraped the bumper? What secret could I possibly offer that would warrant this level of theatrical dread? I laughed, a short, nervous spark of a sound. Confess what, Mom? I have no idea what you're talking about. And that's when the trap sprang. That's when they told me. They didn't shout, not at first. They spoke with a calm, horrifying certainty. They told me my cousin, my 15-year-old cousin Ellie, had told them something during a visit the weekend before. That I had hurt her. The word they used was inappropriate. Then the word became molested. The accusation hung there in the sterile office hallway, so monstrous, so alien, it felt like a line from a movie. It was aimed at me, but it didn't feel like it could possibly be about me. My denial was a reflex. A choked, desperate what? No. That's insane. That never happened. But my voice sounded wrong. It sounded thin. Guilty. I could hear them breathing on the other end, two sets of lungs, perfectly synced. It wasn't a conversation, it was a sentencing. I tried to reason with them, my voice shaking. I brought up Ellie's history, her stories. Mom, remember the French-speaking dog? Remember the diary? I pleaded. She's always been dramatic. There was a cold silence on the other end. Then my father's voice, rough and unfamiliar. This is not the same, Ava. She was crying. She was terrified. My blood ran cold. I stopped breathing. Because right then, my mother's voice cut in, sharp and final. We believe her. 3 words. That was all it took to vaporize 22 years of love and trust. Mom put me on speaker so both my parents could disown me in unison. They told me Ellie was distraught. They told me not to contact them. Not to contact my siblings. Not to contact anyone in the family ever again. The call ended. Just clicked off. I stood there, phone in my hand, staring at the blank wall. My pulse stalls. Because right then I called my brother Mark. We were the closest. He was my rock. Straight to voicemail. I sent a text, my fingers fumbling. Mark, Mom and Dad are saying something crazy about Ellie. You know it's not true. Call me. No, delivered receipt. I tried my sister. Voicemail. I tried my other brother. A recorded message. The number you have dialed has blocked your calls. I tried my sister again. Blocked. By dusk, every single number I had for my family, my blood, returned the same digital verdict. User blocked. I had been erased. I went home, walked into my bathroom, and stood under the shower with all my clothes on, trying to wash off something that wasn't even there. The water was scalding hot, but I was freezing cold. How many exits does one family have? An infinite number, apparently. And I had been shown every single one. What if innocence is invisible? The first days are a blur of static and disbelief. The first weeks are a slow-motion shatter. I'd sit in my car in the office parking lot for an hour each morning, unable to get out, replaying the phone call, searching for a different outcome, a magic set of words I could have said to make them believe me. I'd look at my phone at the call log. It was a list of my attempts to plead my case, all of them unanswered. Red icon after red icon. Failed call. Failed call. Failed text. A digital graveyard of my former life. I saw that I had one voicemail, from my mother, saved from that first terrible day before she blocked me. I don't know why I listened to it. Morbid curiosity. A need to poke the wound to make sure it was real. Her voice wasn't calm anymore. It was a scream, torn from her throat, accusing me of breaking her heart, of destroying their family, of being a monster she didn't recognize. I listened to it once, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Then I deleted it. But you can't delete a sound from your memory. I freeze. Because right then, that night, I went to pour a glass of whiskey. A nice single malt I'd been saving. My hands felt disconnected from my body. Numb. The heavy crystal tumbler just slipped. It hit the slate tile of my kitchen floor and exploded. Shards skittered under the cabinets. The smell of wasted scotch filled the air. I just stared at the mess. It felt right. A perfect visual representation of my insides. My name, my history, my future, all of it, a pile of glittering, useless fragments on the floor. That was the moment the accusation truly landed. Not as words, but as a physical force. On the phone, their breathing had been perfectly synced, a two-person drumbeat counting down to my execution. Speaker hissed, their breathing synced like a verdict drum. I froze. Because right then, my name became a crime scene. I was no longer Ava, their daughter, their sister. I was a monster. A headline. A secret to be hidden away. Will anyone sweep up the shards? I didn't. I left them there. I poured another drink in a different glass, and my hand spasmed again, a phantom echo of the first drop, and that glass fell too, shattering right next to the first. A match set. My pulse stalls. Because right then, a new feeling began to creep in, colder and sharper than grief. Fear. Raw, animal fear. For a whole year, I flinched at every knock at the door, sure the cops were coming for me. I'd be driving home from work, see a police car in my rearview mirror, and my whole body would seize up. I'd have to pull over, my heart hammering against my ribs, gasping for air, convinced they were coming to arrest me, to put me in a cell where my story wouldn't matter. I started having nightmares where I was in a courtroom and everyone on the jury had my mother's face, all of them looking at me with cold disappointment. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, the word guilty echoing in the silent apartment. I stopped breathing. Because right then, after the fear came the rage. It was a slow burn at first, then it became a bonfire. It kept me warm on nights when the loneliness was a physical weight. Some nights I would lie awake and map out ways to ruin my cousin the way she had ruined me. My revenge fantasies were cinematic in their detail. I imagined crashing a family holiday, a Thanksgiving I wasn't invited to, and projecting her history of lies onto the dining room wall for everyone to see. I imagined hiring a private investigator to dig up every ugly secret in her life and anonymously sending it to her husband, her boss, her friends. I let myself marinate in the venom because it was better than the alternative. It was better than the hollow, aching emptiness. The thoughts were ugly, black, and they kept me alive. They gave me a reason to get out of bed in the morning, to become successful enough, strong enough, to one day burn her world to the ground. Years passed. 10 of them. A full decade. The rage cooled from a bonfire to a pilot light, always there, a low hum beneath the surface. The terror faded. The sharp edges of the wound softened into a thick, ugly scar. I never swept up the glass in the kitchen. I just kicked the bigger pieces under the cabinet and let the tiny slivers embed themselves in the grout. A reminder. I leaned into the life I was forced to build. I got a promotion. Then another. I was good at my job. I was reliable. I was a machine of logic and efficiency. My starter house slowly started to feel like a home. The Ducati got a new engine. The basil plant took over the entire windowsill. I made friends, sort of. Work acquaintances. People I could have a beer with, but who I kept at arm's length. How do you explain a family that doesn't exist? They live far away, I'd say. We're not close. A simple, clean lie that covered a festering, complicated truth. I freeze. Because right then, on my 31st birthday, I bought myself the VR headset. It was the best one on the market. As I sat on my floor, carefully peeling the protective plastic off the lenses, I felt a strange sense of peace. This was my world. A digital reality I could control completely. I could be anyone, go anywhere. It was the ultimate escape, the final fortress wall. And in that moment of quiet, manufactured joy, I thought about my flaw. The real one. The one that had made all of this possible. My inner flaw wasn't a secret darkness, it was a desperate, pathetic light. I'd swallow fire for a nod of approval. I remembered being 12, my brother Mark accidentally breaking a lamp my mother cherished. I saw the fear in his eyes, and without thinking, I stepped forward and said I did it. I took the week-long grounding, the shouting, the disappointment. And at the end of it, my mom hugged me and told me she was proud of me for being honest. I was praised for my sacrifice. I learned a dangerous lesson that day, that my pain was worth less than their peace. That swallowing fire was a noble act. When does that hunger burn out? It took this, I realized. It took being scorched from the inside out to finally kill the craving. My pulse stalls. Because right then, my phone buzzed. I was in the garage, tuning the Ducati's carburetor, my hands slick with grease. A text message. From a number I didn't have saved, but I knew it instantly. My mother's. My finger hovered over the delete button. A decade of practice had taught me to cauterize, to sever, to protect. But I didn't. I wiped my hands on a rag and opened it. It was short. 4 sentences. Ava, I don't know if this will reach you. I am so sorry. Ellie told us something at Easter. Can we please talk? I read it 10 times. 20. The words swam. Ellie told us something. What could she possibly say now? I walked out of the garage and sat on the back step, the cold concrete seeping through my jeans. The pilot light inside me flickered. I tried to draft a reply. My thumbs felt clumsy. Part of me, the old me, wanted to write, "It's okay." Part of me wanted to type, "I'm on my way." The hunger was still there, a faint echo. But the new me, the one forged in silence and rage, simply wrote back, "What did she say?" The reply came almost instantly. She said she might have dreamed it. I stopped breathing. Because right then, the whole world stopped. Dreamed it. A 10-year nightmare. A decade of shame and exile and fear. My entire life derailed, my name turned to ash, my family stolen from me, because of a teenager's possible dream. I almost laughed. It was so absurd, so pathetic, it was almost funny. The pilot light of rage inside me roared back to life, a full-blown inferno. I didn't reply to her text for 3 days. I let her wait. I let them all wait. I let them sit in the silence they had created, and for the first time, I was the one holding the matches. When I finally responded, I didn't offer comfort or forgiveness. I offered a time. A date. For a video call. My terms. My turf. My control. The screen flickered to life. And there they were. My parents. 10 years older, a decade of gravity pulling at their faces. They looked smaller than I remembered. Weaker. Their eyes were red-rimmed and fearful. This wasn't a tribunal for me anymore. It was for them. They started talking, tumbling over each other's words, a messy torrent of apologies and explanations. They told me about Easter brunch. The whole extended family was there, the parts that were still speaking to each other, anyway. An aunt, unaware of the decree of my banishment, had asked my mother how I was doing. An awkward silence fell over the table, and all eyes turned to Ellie, now a woman of 25, with a husband and a life of her own. Cornered, she looked down at her plate of pastel-colored eggs. And with a shrug, she delivered the line that detonated a decade of lies. "I don't know," she'd mumbled. "It was a long time ago. Maybe I dreamed it." I freeze. Because right then I listened, my face a mask of calm. The screaming was all on the inside now. I let them finish. I let the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable for them, until they started to squirm in their seats, half a country away. Then I asked my one question. The only one that mattered. "Why?" I said, my voice even cold. "Why did you believe her, just like that, with no questions? Why didn't you ask me?" My father started to cry. Big, silent tears that dripped off his chin. He tried to speak. "Ava girl." The old name felt like a shard of glass in my ear. He choked on it. My mother spoke, her voice thin and reedy. "We were scared. She was so convincing, she described things. We were so afraid for her, we didn't want it to be true. But we thought it was easier to believe one person was a monster than that our whole world was a lie." I stared at her. "So you chose me," I said. I was the easier sacrifice. My father finally found his voice. It was wrong. There's no excuse. We failed you. They had. And in that moment, seeing them so broken, so powerless, I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel satisfaction. I just felt empty. The rage was gone, burned out. There was nothing left to fuel it. I said, "Show me." My father looked up confused. "Show you what?" "Show me you're sorry," I said. "Right now." I watched him, his hands trembling as he picked up his phone. He fumbled with the screen, his fingers clumsy. He navigated to his contacts. He scrolled down. I saw the name on the screen, Ellie. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for, what? Absolution? I just stared back, my face blank. He took a deep breath and pressed the button. Delete contact. A small, almost meaningless digital gesture that felt like the shifting of tectonic plates. Thanks for staying with me. Have you ever seen karma land that fast? My mother told me she'd send something. A few days later, a heavy package arrived on my porch. I opened it. It was my childhood photo album. The thick one with the worn velvet cover, full of school pictures and toothless grins and birthday parties I'd almost forgotten. They had kept it, hidden it away. A relic from a daughter they had tried to pretend never existed. I sat on my floor and went through it, page by page. There I was on my dad's shoulders at the lake. There I was, holding Ash the kitten. Each photo was a ghost. Each smile was a lie, not because it wasn't real then, but because of what came after. It was a wordless apology. A silent act of restitution. Hearing their voices again after a decade was a strange alchemy of pain and comfort. It sliced me open and soothed the wound at the same time. The parents I had lost that day on the phone were gone forever. But these two old, sad people on my computer screen, maybe they could become something else. Is restitution ever enough? No. Not for a stolen decade. Not for the nights spent mapping out revenge or the year I spent terrified of a knock at the door. But it wasn't nothing. It was a start. It's May now. 10 years and 1 month since my life broke in two. I'm in my garden. The basil is a small, fragrant forest. This morning, I finally swept up the last of the shattered whiskey glass from the kitchen floor. I took the shards outside and buried them in the mulch around the base of a new tomato plant, making something grow from the wreckage. It feels right. The fear is gone. Completely. The Ducati still growls, the code still compiles, the house still smells like oil and herbs. My life is the same, but I'm different. I'm not hiding in it anymore. It's not a fortress. It's just a home. The roots, I think, are finally taking. Last night, I put on the VR headset. I didn't turn it on. I just looked at my own reflection in the dark, polished lenses. I saw a woman I almost recognized. Tired, yes. Scarred, definitely. But not broken. Not anymore. There was a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. A half smile. A start. If life twists again, I'll be here to share. What would you have done? Some roots choose stone.